Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debbie Silber, and today's guest is Dr. Nima Rahmany. And Dr. Nima is both a chiropractor and an educator, specializing in helping individuals and professionals get to the root cause of their physical and emotional challenges, from stressed, depressed, and anxious to living powerfully aligned and on purpose. After building a successful chiropractic practice in Maple Ridge, British Columbia, Dr. Nima sold his clinic in June 2016 to pursue his passion for teaching and coaching professionals who are stressed, depressed, and anxious to transform and have their best year ever in both a private and corporate setting. Dr. Nima has integrated all the mind-body tools in his quest for healing stress-related disorders into one simple-to-follow method called the Overview Method, which is the adjustment above atlas that he teaches one-on-one and in groups all over the world in his engaging and edutaining lectures filled with inspired authenticity and edutainment. And buckle up, everyone, because you're in for a highly charged conversation. I'm talking with Dr. Nima Rahmany today, and he's going to share lots of insights around what we're experiencing after betrayal, why we get stuck, and most importantly, what we can do to heal. He's going to teach us how to become trigger-proof and so much more. Here's Dr. Nima. Okay, everybody, this is going to be a very interesting episode because I have Dr. Nima Rahmany with us, and we're going to be talking about the number one strategy for turning feelings of betrayal around. The number one strategy. Did you hear that? So welcome.
The number one. I can honestly say, and it's hard because not many people will be able to get there. That's why I'm saying it's not automatic. But thank you for having me. I can't wait for this conversation.
Absolutely. So let's just talk about betrayal. I mean, that is absolutely everyone who's listening to this podcast. They've been betrayed. And it's affecting them physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So how do you see it before we even get started, how do you see it within your practice, within the work that you do? How do you see betrayal showing up?
Well, how do I see betrayal showing up? It's so, if you told me like 10 years ago that I would be having this conversation, I'm a chiropractor. So what the heck do I have any right to be talking about betrayal? What I would notice is patients are coming in with stress-related problems for various health issues. They're going to have jaw pain, headaches, digestive issues, hormonal imbalance, like chronic pain, that kind of thing. And so I would notice these patterns again and again and again. And after about 10 years, getting to know my patients and becoming really close with them, I would just get to know their lives. And they would tell me about, I would see that they were coming in because of stress-related disorders. And if I was to really get to know them, they would tell me about their relationship breakdowns. Okay. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm seeing these patterns that fractures in our relationships, heartbreaks, setbacks, upsets, are emotional wounds. They're emotional wounds, much like I twist my ankle. It's the same thing. It feels the same, if not worse. You know what I mean? It feels so horrendous, but it's an emotional wound. And if we don't heal that properly with the right tools, with the right guidance, move it through the body, neutralize it, then what happens is it starts to fester and that emotional wound starts to impact us physically. So I would notice all of these people coming in, men and women, but primarily women with this issue. And I would just notice that, wow, open loops in relationships, breakdowns in relationships impact our health. So the way that this would show up for me first, Debbie, was as a chiropractor, these people were coming in with these issues. And I was like, well, geez, I'm not really helping them if I'm giving them a nice, a nice relaxing experience, getting adjusted. It feels better. It regulates your nervous system. But still, then they're going back home and festering over the same thoughts. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. So I started creating these workshops in my practice called Life Skills for a Stressful World. They were 3-hour Saturday morning lectures, and the patients that would come in and learn how to shift their perspective about those problems and learn how to aim their focus in life all of a sudden would experience better outcomes with the work that I was doing. And I was like, well, geez, fast forward 10 years, Debbie, and I I'm doing just those. Those 3-hour workshops have now turned into online programs, live
Mhm.
trainings to help clear past trauma and shift your perspective on the emotional wounds, to heal your emotional wounds.
Yeah, and you know it's so interesting because you mentioned those symptoms in the beginning, and we have a quiz on the site to see to what extent someone's struggling with something that was discovered called post-betrayal syndrome,
Yes,
which is this
yes.
physical, mental, and emotional collection of symptoms so common to betrayal, and something like digestive issues. I mean, it's so
Constant.
common,
Yeah.
or hormonal issues, any stress related.
And you're going to if you're going to the doctor with these, the
Mhm.
doctor doesn't ask, hey, were you like, did you have feelings of betrayal? Was there a breakdown in your relationship? That's just not in their training. You're just a blood test with some numbers, and those can be
I see.
chemically altered. But I really am fascinated by going, if you just teach the person to go upstream and resource themselves, shift their perspective, heal their old traumas, their attachment wounds, see how this is just a transference of a past unresolved wound, and
Mhm.
teach them how to complete that. All of a sudden the body starts to heal,
But
autoimmune
yeah.
problems go away, headaches start to go away. And I'm like, wow, I'm not wasting my time in the office, but I really am so inspired to go upstream and teach people the root cause of why they got sick, and then give them the life skills to self-regulate their nervous
Mhm.
systems from emotional wounds like betrayal. That's just one of them. Resentment's another one that'll turn around, and like it's all together. That's what
Mhm.
causes anxiety, is those unresolved. So I notice you're coming in with anxiety. It's not anxiety, it's unresolved guilt, unresolved betrayal, unresolved, all of these things from those relationship breakdowns that you just went through.
Mhm.
That's why you're taking the pills. Why don't we
That's
just
it.
go after and heal those emotional wounds? So I
That's
created a method to do that.
Yeah, and it's true. By the time it manifests physically, there's already so much going on mentally and emotionally. Okay, so how do you turn around feelings of betrayal?
Oh, amazing. Well, in order to turn around the feelings of betrayal, you must first get the person, like, let's say you came to me, Debbie, and that was happening. The first thing that I would do with you is that I would remove you from your story and just sit you down and educate you about human behavior.
Mhm. And I'm going to
Okay.
stop you right there because one of the things that I see so consistently is we get very attached to our story. So when you say I'll
Uh-huh.
remove you from the story, that's a big ask for a lot of people. And in the
It is.
stages of going from betrayal to breakthrough, what I see is in a classic stage 3, it's that we become very tied to our story, and if we're unwilling to see ourselves without it, we're going nowhere.
Correct.
So let's just dive into that then. How do you get someone to let go of that story?
I don't. They must want to. Okay. So I teach people about the concept of, this thing happened and I hold on to a state of victimhood.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, here's the thing, you either want healing or you want to identify with your story. You cannot have both. So the first thing that I would do is, people follow my content, they'll message me like this: I'm sick and freaking tired of my story. I'm ready to let it go. Good. Now I'm ready to work with you.
Mhm.
Outside of that, then you and I are not a fit.
Mhm.
So
It's funny you say that because I remember having a woman come into my office when I was doing private coaching, and she came in, the arms folded, sitting down. I want to heal. No, you don't. No,
no,
you
you
don't.
don't.
Because you
No,
have to get rid of your story. You're not willing.
exactly, Debbie. You
Yeah.
nailed it.
Yeah.
So that's why, actually, I'm going to be doing here's how I do it, Debbie. For example, today in my Facebook group called Trigger Proof, how to regulate stress. Today, I'm going to be doing a class on the payoffs that you have when you hold on to all of these persistent complaints.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the payoff of holding on to the story.
What are
Okay.
the payoffs?
The payoffs are, number one, you get to justify where you're at in your life. It's like, oh, because of what you did to me, Debbie, what you did to me, my life sucks right now, because of what you did to me. In other words, I can justify where I'm at, not by taking ownership of it, but by blaming you for it. I justify my shitty situation. That's payoff number one. Payoff number two is I get to avoid responsibility. I avoid all responsibility. In our interaction, there was a two-way street. You did this to me. I'm going to not look at myself, not look at my part. I'm not saying take blame for it, but there's two of us here. I'm not going to look at my side of it. I'm not going to own any of it because it hurts too much. And I'm going to give you the responsibility. By holding on to that complaint and story, I get to make you responsible and I get to avoid all responsibility. Number three, I get to invalidate. I get to be right. Excuse me. I get to be right and make you wrong. And that's very alluring. That's extremely alluring.
Feels good to be right. Yep.
Oh, my ego loves it. But if I just stay connected to my story, and then you introduce me a concept that, Nima, there's, let's get out of your story and let's look at the big picture. Then if I'm in my emotional wound and I'm in my immature state, I'll be like, Debbie, you're on her side. Screw you. You're on her side. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I just need everybody to support my story. That feels good temporarily, but it doesn't result in healing. I'm only interested in healing. How do I get people to own it? I tell them, okay, that is your story, but it comes with some costs. The costs are a lack of fulfillment in your life. So you can't have that story and have fulfillment, whichever, you have to choose. If you're choosing that, okay, I can't do that for you, but you got to choose that. So it's costing you fulfillment. It's costing you your health and vitality. Okay. It's costing you your power because you're now a victim giving away your power to somebody who made a decision one night or over a period of time. Now they own your life. They have power and you've disempowered. So it's costing you. The story is costing you a great deal of power. And the last one is it's costing you your help, like self-expression and humor.
Sure, we don't feel good when we're walking around with that story.
Which you're magnetic. You're a magnetic person. When you are aligned, you're out of story and you're in your heart, you're magnetic. So you're holding on to that destroys any opportunity of healing and then really possibly creating a new relationship that was 10 times better and far less codependent than the one you were just in.
Right, absolutely. And we have to be willing to do that. So
once they see that, then they're like, oh my God, I'm holding on to a story. I'm ready. So they have to go through that first. You have to, in other words, you have to recognize in order to get over this and let go of the story, you have to acknowledge that your story is costing you more, Debbie, than the payoffs of holding on to it. And once you do, now you're ready to let go of that story.
Okay. Let's talk about triggers because triggers are extraordinarily painful. And in the betrayal community, PTSD is very real with many people. Their bodies are brought right back to cognitively, they know the betrayal isn't happening anymore, but tell that to the body because the body's acting as if it's happening right then. Yeah. When you say becoming trigger proof, what do you mean and how do you do it?
Good question. So trigger proof, Debbie, doesn't mean trigger less. I get triggered hundreds of times a day, okay? Especially if you're in a relationship, especially if you have kids, you have a baby on the way, like there's triggers happening, not even with me, people around me. And as a coach, you're dealing with some heavily triggered people. So I'm constantly observing myself and noticing me getting activated by certain things. A trigger is a nervous system activation. A trigger, anxiety is a prolonged trigger. This is a big truth bomb that I got. I was like, oh my gosh. Here's what's happening. A trigger is an old emotional wound that's been in my body long before I can even remember often. And just by hanging out with you, you'll say something or do something. And what's happening in this moment isn't happening in this moment. It's from that old thing that happened. And a trigger is an old unresolved wound that is stuck in your body that you don't have any control over. A trigger is information. It's
And
information from your nervous system of your unresolved wounding.
right. And I'll add this, a trigger can even be, I mean, how often is it where you see someone who reminds you of someone? They can have a similar walk or look or hairstyle or mannerisms, and you are just brought right back.
Let me give you an example of that, Debbie. You nailed it. If I'm talking to you and all of a sudden you raise your voice at me a little bit, my body's going to go like this. What's that? It's not Debbie, it's my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Still stuck in my body. So the biggest revelation that I discovered when I'm helping people going through this betrayal concept, teaching them, is that the feelings of betrayal that you're going through, and concurrently the meaning you're making out of it, which is I'm not worthy of love, those two things are not coming from your partner who just betrayed you. This is an old familiar wounding that you felt before that's been unresolved in your body, that you've been energetically, cosmically, universally designed to meet again as an opportunity to go back and heal the younger self that felt it.
Yeah, and this is
and
why.
That's what being trigger proof is.
Yeah, and let's talk
taking the trigger and going back and healing, resolving the real wound that this is about.
And I want to talk about that. But before I do, this is why right here at that very moment, this is why it's so common to use things like food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior, because that's what's painful to face. And I always say in my community, face it, feel it, heal it. And this is exactly what's painful. But these are the triggers that we need to deal with, because they're showing us, they're like giving us, they really are, they're giving us an opportunity to take a look and see what hasn't been resolved. So then how do
I
you
call it a portal. I call it a portal. It's like your trigger is not something to avoid. Face it, feel it, heal it. I love that. I love that little, it's so easy to remember. Mm-hmm. Face it, feel it, which is the big challenge in the first place, because we're so used to dissociating from it, running from it, sedating, as you were saying. And so what we do is we go in. So I created a methodology, which is an active form of meditation. It's an active meditation that takes you, that's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Customized to your specific wounding. Okay. And let's say you came in and you were dealing with a betrayal that just happened. So your partner just you just discovered that your partner had an affair. Okay, great. What we would do through the work is uncover the younger self of Debbie that these feelings were familiar with, right? And then we create a customized meditation that you're going to do as part of your healing journey, as part of like your training. You're building biceps, you're doing, curls, you're doing sit-ups, you're healing those emotional wounds, self-healing them. It's through a process. And so the trigger, basically, you uncover what the feeling is and the meaning that you're making out of it. And what we do is we guide you back to your earliest unresolved wound. This would possibly be, often this is what we'll see, is that when did you see this before? Oh, when I was 8 years old, when I was 13 years old, we discovered my dad was having an affair on my mother. And we all discovered that. I'm like, did you not feel betrayed? And you made that, you made that about you, didn't you? You made that mean that you were unworthy of love. You felt that. Good. We go back and we reconnect with that inner child, that younger 13-year-old, 8-year-old, however old you were, and you really see her or him. You really connect with them and you reestablish a connection. And what would you say if they were your own daughter or your own son? And all of the meanings that little one made out of the entire thing. And here's the key. This is the number, when I say number one, this is the big that shows true healing. This is how somebody has demonstrated true healing right here. Once you have fully empathized with that younger part of you that was betrayed before, you fully see her, love her, and give her all of the validation that she was missing in that moment, because dad did this to mom and she made it mean that she's unworthy. You let her know energetically through meditation, through journaling, it didn't, dad's behavior had really nothing to do with you. Okay. Does that resonate?
Sure. One of the biggest things I say in my community is, even though it happened to you, it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about you.
But the thing is that everybody knows that, but there's an 8-year-old inside of you that feels differently. Because cognitively, I can tell you, Deb, it's not about you. And you're like, yeah, you're right. But there's still an 8-year-old Debbie inside that felt betrayed by that thing that doesn't freaking believe you. You need to action, and that's the one that takes practice. You need to actually drop in until she finally believes you. That could take weeks, that could take months, that could take years, depending on your level of resistance. What you've done then, you've integrated that, you've seen, and then once you've connected with her and changed the story around that wasn't about you, then here's the kicker. This is the part that many don't achieve, but this is how I can tell. I can tell by talking to you if you fully overcome the betrayal or you're just bullshitting me. Here's how you do it. You then see your father's behavior through his wounding. You see his behavior towards mom and the toxic relationship that they had. You see his family system and why it made sense at the time that they had that breakdown. In other words, you're observing. This is why I call it the overview method, because you're looking from that perspective, from the earth, from an astronaut, very non-personal, non-egocentric self. And you're like, why did at the time, given dad's wounding, given mom's wounding, given their history, why did it make sense that he try to fulfill his needs externally by not saying? Why did it make sense that he didn't just speak up and say, I'm not fulfilled? I would like to, like, why did, and then you start to empathize with the situation before that. Literally, I've seen people who've been in therapy for 20 years and just that one little piece destroys that little wounded self, egocentric self that thinks, I'm not worthy of love. She immediately realizes that she is. Together, now that wounded self comes back to this connection with your current partnership, and you see the same thing, and all of a sudden, you're not a victim of betrayal anymore. You see yourself as how it was a perfect situation for you. Your unconsciousness got you into this. Like, not to blame. This isn't victim blaming. This is, oh, of course I said yes to this situation. Of course I betrayed and abandoned myself long before he did.
Yeah.
And as soon as they own that, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not a victim anymore. And I can feel in their body, their physiology shifts, their health problems resolve. And just by talking to them in their tone of voice, they're no longer wounded little victims. They're empowered humans.
And that's also when they're ready to take on forgiveness, which is a monster topic. I would love to know how you work with people as far as forgiveness goes, because once we get to that level, when there's that acceptance and that understanding and that empathy, then there's that willingness to forgive.
I'm going to say something that might trigger you, especially to a community of people who are really, and that's okay. I've done this before, and I'm okay with whatever result. My certainty is completely 100% on this. The highest form of forgiveness is the authentic recognition that everything served you and that there is nothing to forgive. Let me say that again. The highest form of forgiveness is the authentic recognition that everything served you and there is actually nothing to forgive.
And I hear that. Absolutely. And there's such a wonderful book I remember recommending to so many people. It was called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. And what was so great about it was it explained how these people come into your lives. They're your greatest teachers. And it's when you can look at them that way, then it absolutely served a purpose, because you learned something so powerful about yourself that you never would have learned, never would have believed had that not happened. And it reveals a side of you that you never would have seen.
But here's the thing. In order to get there, very few people get to that point. I would say 99% of forgiveness is bullshit. Okay? I can tell because I've been a chiropractor for 20 years. I'm listening to the tone of your voice. I can tell if it's genuine and if it's not. The ones who truly get it I ask them, what would you change? And they say nothing. And I say, are you bullshitting? No, I'm actually grateful it happened. And then I say, what do you have to forgive? And they say, I don't need to forgive anything. It set me free. I wouldn't be where I am today. It's beyond forgiveness. Like, first we have a judgment on something. It happened to us. We must not bypass that. Many people who understand this bypass that and go, yeah, radical forgiveness. I'm just going to forgive. That's also bullshit, because you must first feel the betrayal fully. You must cry the tears. You must wail. You must scream. You must be the victim at first. You can't bypass that. Many people spiritual bypass that and say, oh, I'm above this. I've read some spiritual books. I've gone to an ashram. I'm beyond this. No, that's bullshit. You actually have to feel the wound. Okay, number one. Then you have a judgment on it. Then you get to a state of acceptance. Acceptance is the next level up, which is, you know what? It still sucks, but I'm not as mad as I used to be. It still sucks, but I still wish it didn't happen. That's the next level up. That's acceptance. It still sucks. I still wish it never happened. There's another level available to you if you're willing to do the work. This is what will heal you. This is what will expand you. And this is what, the method that I created is you then take it to the next level. It takes us about an hour or two, or sometimes a few months, depending on how deep the emotional charge is, for you to look and find the gifts to the point where you see that, there is nothing to forgive, because you actually, it was an entanglement. It was a part of your hero's journey that, unfortunately, it was a wake-up call that we needed to then, sometimes, like we've even seen this in relationships where betrayal has happened, and it's like, all right, this is either a way out or a way back in. Either way, this, it's either a way out or a way back in. And after the betrayal happened and the healing happened, that infidelity had been the greatest thing to happen to both the couple, because they now are walking completely conscious of one another, whereas before they weren't. And they wouldn't have had it not been for that pain. Pain is a great motivator for us to take action. So it's wise for us to keep going till we have true gratitude for it.
And my listeners know that that's exactly my story. So, and here's also why forgiveness, and I've seen this too, when we forgive just because we just want to get it over with or move forward, it just doesn't work. And
that's a bypass.
And when we feel safe and valued and we forgive, we feel better. When we do not feel safe and valued and we forgive, it's just not real, and it just never, ever works, and it backfires. So what do you want to make sure everyone knows as we wrap up?
I want to make sure everybody knows that whatever you're going through, it's not about what it's about. This thing that you've attracted into your life, not because you're a bad person or that you have found yourself in, it's not about this. It's about an earlier wounding within yourself that you might not have been looking at, you might have been putting away, you might have been ignoring. And this is a beautiful opportunity for you to use this trigger, this wound, as a way to go back inside and really resource and fill your cup, so that you're no longer looking for external validation to give it to you, so that you can fully trust again.
That's the name of my book, coming out in September. Trust Again.
Really?
Exactly that. Trust Again. I teach
that's amazing. It only can come when you fully trust you.
Absolutely.
I promise you that's your message. It has to be your message, because if you fully trust you, then you're not relying on somebody outside of you. You know what I'm saying?
So give us one parting nugget for the person who is just new and new to the betrayal, and there's so much pain, so much anguish, so much heartbreak, and then a 30-second nugget to the person who's just stuck. It's become a way of life. They're stuck in their story.
The first thing that I want them to know, the first one is that everything that you're feeling right now makes total sense. And your biggest obstacle right now in this moment when things are hot is judging your feelings. Don't judge them right now. Feel them all. You have every right to feel them. You are seen. You are heard. You're not alone. Um, uh, just feel them fully for now until you're ready to alchemize them.
Beautiful.
That's it.
Yeah.
The second one was, what was the second one?
Someone
Who's stuck. Someone who's stuck. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's stuck. Okay. Here's a different one. Here's the next thing. A little bit of tough love. A little bit of tough love. You're stuck because you are either unwilling to feel your feelings, or you're stuck on a victim story. You are really, really, you just are just so angry, so bitter, so hurt. And to take responsibility is scary. It's painful. You're doubting yourself. It's time for you to step up and get very, what's the word? Ambitious. What would you love to create? If you're stuck, what would you love to create? In 1 year time, in 18 months time, paint a picture for me. Give me exactly what ideal looks like. You want to look at you want to look in the mirror and say, I love this person. You want to feel great in your body. You want to feel like you're just that feminine radiance flowing again. You want that mojo again. Good. Start there. That's the vision. And now work backwards. Who would I need to become? What emotional baggage do I need to let go of? What healing, what wounding have I not been dealing with? What wake-up call have I been needing? This is your time to start to dig up the past and start to make full sense of it, and your connect to your heart. Learn how to connect to you're stuck because you're disconnected from your heart, and you need to heal that trauma. And so get some support and do it.
There you go. Wonderful, wonderful insights and advice. Where do we go to learn more about you?
I give you the show notes. You can check in the show notes, but it's drnima.com. I have actually a free training that for anybody who is interested in learning more how to become trigger proof. It's a 90-minute intensive. I'll give you the promo code to make it free for all of your listeners, Debbie. And yeah, so it's virtual work, drnima.com/VW1. And then if you, there's a promo code trigger proof, all in small and one word, then you get it for free, and you get to learn how to basically go from trigger to flow in the least amount of time by going inside and taking responsibility for it and healing those wounds.
Wonderful. I want to thank you so much for your time today. I know you helped so many people with the insight that you shared.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I learned a lot from that conversation, like how anxiety is a prolonged trigger and how our healing depends on our level of resistance. Stay in touch with Dr. Nima by going to drnima.com, and we'll have all of his information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. Take your time when it comes to forgiveness, and be sure not to bypass any of the important phases. First, you need to get it out fully. You've heard me say face it, feel it, heal it, and this would be the face it part. Next, get to a place of acceptance where you're making sense and meaning out of the experience. Finally, find the gifts in the experience. What did you learn? What did it teach you? In our programs, this is something we go through in great detail, because when you see how much you've learned because of it, you feel so proud, so confident, so empowered, and it naturally leads you to the next and best step. Of course, your story could be leaving some symptoms that need cleanup, so take the post-betrayal syndrome quiz to see what may be lingering in the wake of your betrayal at thepbtinstitute.com/quiz. And I'm excited to share the PBT Institute membership community with you. Imagine everything you'd ever need to become your physical, mental, emotional best. Community, support, certified coaches and practitioners you can schedule time with, daily classes on all kinds of interesting topics, curated experts teaching advanced strategies in the areas of health, mindset, spirituality, personal development. Imagine the most friendly, welcoming, and supportive place to become your best, all online. I'm so excited to welcome you. Go to thepbtinstitute.com/join to learn more. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to be with you next time, and here's to your breakthrough.